What do we do when people claim that we're not to judge? Are we being too judgmental? Maybe they're right. The first thing you do when you hear critiques like this, I mean, it's easy to say, oh, no, I'm not, you don't know what you're talking about, and you get into a fight or something like that. But sometimes critiques have value. Sometimes we should stop and listen to them. So what does this passage mean? What did Jesus mean when he says, judge not lest he be judged? Can we really not judge the sins of believers? Can we only judge maybe whether a person is a believer or not? Is Matthew 7 a prohibition against judging unbelievers for their unbelief? Is that just left to God and we should not even worry about the unbelievers? They're unbelievers, they're put out. Let's just deal with the issues of the church. We gotta first understand that our language betrays us a little bit here because we carry into our scripture reading a 21st century understanding of judging and judgment, right? And the word judging has really become almost a word to beat people up with. Judging is primarily seen as any kind of criticism. Who are you to judge me? It's like judging and condemnation are the same thing, is what a lot of people think. And that's not necessarily true. Sometimes you can judge something to be worthy or unworthy. But there is an aspect in this passage, we have to at least be fair and say, who are you to try and remove the speck from your brother's eye when you're trying to take the log out of your own? So there's obviously, in this context, Jesus is talking about judgment of a corrective kind. So that's true. But when we think of judgment, you got to go more broadly than that. You got to go back to the Old Testament concept of judgment. Judging was a huge part of being a Jew. You judged a lot of stuff. For example, you see an animal, maybe you're hungry, you shoot the animal. What do you have to do? You have to judge whether that animal is eatable or not, right? You have to look at the kosher laws. Is the animal kosher? If it's not kosher, even though I'm hungry, I can't shoot it and eat it. Okay? Or you have to judge, it's a Sabbath, and you can only travel maybe a Sabbath day's journey. What counts as work? What counts as not work? What makes me clean? What makes me unclean? Judgment in the Jewish understanding is all wrapped up in this ancient idea of cleanliness, clean and unclean. Matter of fact, the ancient Jewish culture divided the world into two simple categories. There were them, the chosen ones, children of Abraham, children of the promise, and then there was everybody else, the Gentiles, right? The Gentiles. Those weren't the guys that you wanted to hang around with if you were a kosher Jew, if you were an Orthodox Jew. Merrill Unger says in his dictionary, quote, "The laws of cleanliness and eating kosher were things that separated the clean from the unclean. Therefore, non-believing heathen, the Gentiles, were also considered unclean, and because of that, the Jews considered them fit only for eternal hellfire." That got stretched, that got pulled, that got distorted by the rabbis into being even the Gentiles, because they eat unclean things, they themselves are unclean. How could I sit at a table with a Gentile when the stuff that he serves is going to soil me? Therefore, he is lost. And the judgment would be, we don't even talk to them, we don't, right? The rabbis of this time even taught that a faithful Jew can pray, saying, thank God that I'm not a Gentile and not a slave and not a woman. That was the three prayers and that's in the Talmud. This is great, helpful for me. So if that's the point I'm shooting toward, but you get the idea. The judgment that really Jesus is talking about is a judgment against an individual, basically writing them off to hell. And he says, don't do that. Only God does that. Only God. This is why we in modern day, or at least 50 years ago, would say that it would be a curse, a swear word, a vulgarity to tell someone that they are damned to hell. When you use those words, you are violating the Matthew 7 command.